everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Brian here at Red Leaf Ranch. And as you can see, it's a really beautiful day here in Middle Tennessee. Our last frost date has finally passed, so it's a safe time to finally plant a lot of the heat-loving fruits and vegetables out in the garden. That means it's a great time to finally plant tomatoes. Tomatoes are one of my favorite plants to grow in the garden. They are so prolific, so beautiful to watch. I love how they smell, and they're one of my favorite things to cook with in the kitchen. Last year was my first year growing tomatoes ever, and I learned so much. So today I wanted to share with you guys what I've learned and what I'm gonna be doing this year when planting my tomatoes. So the first thing I'm gonna think about when planting my tomatoes is the location. I want it to be somewhere where it's gonna get full sun, at least 6 hours of sunlight a day, because tomatoes really love a lot of light. I also want to plant it somewhere where I'm gonna be able to give it support for it to grow, because tomatoes can get quite large and they have a lot of arms that sprawl all over the place. So I've chosen this middle bed here with this trellis that I've made out of some repurposed cattle gates to give it the support it needs to grow to its fullest potential. Now, something I just learned this year is that tomatoes actually have a lot of these fine hairs on it called trichomes. And these trichomes serve a few purposes. If you plant your tomato with the trichomes above the soil, these trichomes will act as a repellent for insects. It'll help build resistance to cold weather. But if you actually plant these trichomes underneath the soil, some of the trichomes will eventually turn into roots. And the more roots that a tomato plant has, any plant has really, the more nutrients and the more water they'll be able to absorb. So that'll only be of great benefit to the tomato, and it'll give it a really great foundation for it to grow really strong, really healthy, and give you a very productive yield throughout the growing season. So with that said, I am going to be planting my tomatoes very, very deep, so that a lot of these trichomes are underneath the soil, because I really want to give them that strong foundation. Before actually planting our tomato, I wanted to talk about a very special mixture I made here of some compost, mature compost, some fertilizer, bone meal, and Epsom salt. Tomatoes need a really nice boost of calcium when planting them, so I added bone meal to this mix to give it that boost. The calcium helps establish a really healthy root system, and it also helps the plant prevent blossom end rot, which is when the flowers begin to rot, or even the new fruit starts to rot as well. So adding some calcium to the mix really should help deter that. Last year, when growing my tomatoes, they were actually growing really prolifically. They were flowering a lot, but I noticed that they weren't producing a lot of fruit. And a friend actually told me that tomato plants need a nice boost of magnesium to be able to produce abundant fruit. So I started to sprinkle a bit of Epsom salt at the base of the tomato plant, and within 2 to 3 weeks I noticed a significant difference, and they started to produce a lot more fruit. So this year I'm adding Epsom salt to the mix to give it that boost that it needs from the get-go. But with all of that said, let's get into it. Let's plant our tomato. The first thing I'm gonna do is dig my hole. I'm gonna make a really, really deep hole. Actually, probably a little deeper than what I intend to use to plant the tomato, because at the very bottom of where I'm planting, I'm gonna be putting that mix I told you guys about. Now, this bed has been worked over the past year, so it's actually quite nice and loose already, which is really nice to see. This is a pretty tall plant, so I think I'm gonna get like maybe 10 inches deep, maybe even a foot down. I like using my bare hands. I like to get messy in the garden, it's real fun. Great, that feels pretty deep. Awesome, I'm really grateful that the soil is nice and loose under here. In Tennessee, we have a lot of really hard clay, so it's nice to see that everything we've been doing in the beds has loosened the soil up down here. Great, that feels pretty nice and deep. Oh yeah, definitely. So now I'm gonna apply our mix. I think 3 scoops would be a really good amount. So we got 1, 2, and 3. I'm just gonna work it in there a bit. And again, this is gonna give our tomato plant all the goodness it needs to grow beautifully. Perfect. All right, yeah, that's gonna be great. So before actually planting our tomato, I'm going to cut a lot of these leaves off. Probably up to here, I'd say. When you plant the tomato, you don't want any of the leaves touching the actual soil, because that's just gonna invite any soil-borne diseases or funguses to crawl up onto the plant, and you definitely don't want that. So let's chop them off. And this one too. And I'll actually just leave them in the hole, because they'll just break down and give nutrients to the plants over time. All right, and with that, I think we're ready to actually get it in there. It's quite simple to release it from the pot. I like to squeeze it to loosen it up a bit. Just gently tug. Oh, wonderful. You can see it has a beautiful root system. It is definitely ready to be planted. And there were actually some roots poking out from the bottom of the pot, which was a pretty nice sign that it was ready to get into the ground. So here we go. Get it nice and deep. You can see just how deep. That's about it looks like about 10 inches into the soil there. Awesome. Let's see, I like to position it so I know it's gonna grow well. Awesome. And now we're just gonna dig it in. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see how it does. This is great. So as you can see, it's really nice and deep in there. I'm making sure that the leaves aren't actually touching the soil. But there you have it. That's all it takes. Now, all we have to do is water it in. All right, we want to make sure we give it a really nice heavy water to make sure everything settles in nicely. Wonderful. And as you water, you want to be sure to avoid wetting the leaves. Tomatoes do not like getting their leaves too wet. It just invites funguses to build up. Now, one thing I do want to know is, as you can see, I've applied a really thick layer of mulch here. I'm using this old straw that I've found, but I'm actually gonna leave a really large opening around the tomato plant so that the soil around the plant can warm up. Tomatoes really like warm soil, so I'm gonna give it all the room it needs to get nice and heated up. And then when it actually gets nice and warm, I'll cover around the tomato plant again, because I want to be able to retain that moisture and not have it dry up so quickly. So there you go. Our tomato is planted. Now, I'm only gonna plant one round of tomatoes right now, and I'm gonna be planting in succession. Something I've learned last year is not to plant everything at once. As excited as you may be, it's really nice to space out your planting. So in 2 weeks, I'm gonna be planting another round of tomatoes to really carry out the harvest and the growing season. You don't want to feel overwhelmed having to harvest everything at once, so it's really helpful to plant everything in succession. I will also be planting a few plants around it as companions to our tomato plants. I'm going to be planting marigolds, which help deter root nematode and other pests. I'm going to be planting calendula around the border as well to help deter pests. I will also be planting basil in some spaces around the tomato as well. Basil is said to help deter pests and also help enrich the flavor of the actual tomatoes. So I'm excited to see how everything goes this year. But with that, that's all I have for you guys today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's inspired you to get out there and plant your tomato plants with all the insight that you need. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. I love to hear from you guys, or even if you have any tips, because I am still learning. I feel like we are always learning in the garden, and that's what makes it so exciting. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It really helps out our channel. And share this video as well if you don't know anyone who is going to be planting tomatoes. If you want to support the work we're doing here at the ranch, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can buy handmade soaps and candles made by yours truly. Again, all of the support comes back to the ranch and helps benefit all of the work that we're doing here. I can't thank you all enough for all the love and support we've received. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon.